The train screeched as it slowed, iron wheels grinding against the rails in a long, aching protest. Clara Whitmore, soon to be Clara Whitaker, she had practiced saying, sat perfectly still until the final jolt ran through the carriage. Around her, passengers gathered parcels and shawls, murmuring with relief at the journey's end. She pressed her gloved hands together in her lap, steadying the tremor that had lived in her fingers for the last 2,000 miles. This was it. Through the smudged glass, she saw the town emerge from the dust like something sketched in charcoal. Low wooden buildings, a water tower leaning slightly to one side, a wide stretch of empty land beyond it all. Nothing like the brick-lined streets she had left behind. Nothing like the tidy illustrations in the newspapers that had convinced her the West was a place of promise. The conductor called the stop. She rose carefully, smoothing the pale blue traveling dress she had chosen because Daniel had once written that blue reminded him of open skies. The thought warmed her chest. He would be waiting. He had promised. She stepped down from the train into dry heat and wind. The platform boards creaked under her boots. A gust caught her hat, and she steadied it quickly, scanning the small crowd. A man in suspenders embraced his wife. A young boy waved excitedly at a returning father. 2 ranch hands shouted greetings across the platform. But no one stood alone holding a folded newspaper nervously. No one searched faces with shy anticipation. She adjusted the small valise hanging from her wrist and waited, telling herself trains sometimes arrived earlier than expected. Perhaps he was delayed. Perhaps his horse had thrown a shoe. She reached into her reticule and withdrew his last letter, its edges softened from rereading. Clara, I will be waiting at the station myself. I wouldn't trust anyone else with the honor of greeting my bride. Her lips curved faintly at the memory of those words. 10 minutes passed, then 15. The platform emptied gradually until only dust and distant wagon wheels remained. The station clerk locked one of the freight doors and glanced her way with open curiosity. Clara's heart began to pound harder. She stepped toward the clerk, posture straight despite the unease rising within her. Sir, she began politely, I'm looking for Mr. Daniel Whitaker. He was to meet me here. The clerk froze, not dramatically, just long enough for her stomach to tighten. His gaze flickered toward the far end of the street, then back to her face. You come from back east? He asked carefully. Yes, she replied, a thread of fear weaving through her voice. He removed his spectacles and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Ma'am, maybe you ought to speak with Sheriff Cole. Her pulse stumbled. Is he ill? She pressed quickly. Was there an accident? The clerk didn't answer directly. Instead, he gestured toward a squat building with a faded star nailed beside the door. Clara swallowed. The wind swept across the platform again, tugging at her skirt, lifting dust into the air. Daniel had promised she would not be alone. Yet as she picked up her valise and stepped off the platform toward the sheriff's office, she felt more alone than she ever had in her life. Sheriff Cole did not speak at first after telling her. The words seemed to linger in the air between them, heavy and unmovable. Found him 3 days ago. Clara sat stiffly in the wooden chair across from his desk, her valise still clutched in her lap as if she might be asked to board the next train home at any moment. The room felt too small, the ceiling too low. A single barred window let in a slice of harsh afternoon light that cut across the floor like a blade. Shot, the sheriff repeated quietly, as though gentler. The second time, out near his barn. Her ears rang. Shot. The word refused to settle into sense. Daniel had written of crops, of repairing fences, of building a second bedroom onto the house for when children came. His letters had been full of plans. Plans required living. Was it an accident? She managed, her voice thin. The sheriff's jaw tightened. No, ma'am. He stood slowly, walked to a cabinet, and retrieved a small cloth bundle. He carried it back with a kind of reluctant care and set it on the desk before her. We gathered his personal effects. Her hands hesitated before reaching forward. When she unfolded the cloth, she found a pocket watch, silver, slightly scratched, and a simple leather wallet. Inside the wallet was the photograph she had sent months ago. The very one she had posed for in her cousin's parlor, hands folded, eyes hopeful. He had kept it on him. The realization cracked something inside her. They took most everything else, the sheriff continued. Livestock's gone. Tools. Even the wagon. Why? She whispered. Hard winter's coming, he said grimly. Men get desperate. Clara pressed the photograph to her chest, struggling to draw a full breath. Did he suffer? The question escaped before she could stop it. Sheriff Cole removed his hat. It was quick. She nodded once, though the motion felt distant from her own body. After a moment, the sheriff cleared his throat. You should see the place. Best to understand what you're dealing with. The ride to the ranch passed in a haze. The land rolled endlessly, wind flattening the tall grass in silver waves. Clara watched it without truly seeing. Somewhere out there, Daniel had stood and imagined her beside him. When the house finally appeared, her fingers dug into the edge of the wagon seat. The ranch looked wounded. One shutter hung loose, slamming softly against the wall. The barn doors sagged open like broken wings. No horses grazed in the pasture. No smoke rose from the chimney. She stepped down before the sheriff could offer his hand. Each step toward the house felt unreal, as though she walked through someone else's misfortune. The front door creaked as she pushed it open. Inside, chaos reigned. Drawers overturned, crockery shattered, a table flipped on its side. This was meant to be her home. She moved slowly into what must have been the bedroom. The bed frame stood bare, mattress slashed open. Feathers littered the floor like fallen snow. Her gaze landed on a dark stain near the doorway. She stopped breathing. The sheriff remained respectfully behind her, giving distance to her grief. Clara did not scream. She did not collapse. She simply stood in the wreckage of the life she had crossed a continent to claim, and understood that nothing of it remained but dust and silence. The sheriff waited outside while Clara stood alone in what should have been her home. The wind pushed through the broken window panes, carrying dust that swirled lazily across the floorboards. Somewhere in the distance, a loose shutter banged in uneven rhythm, the only sound in a house that felt hollowed out. She forced herself to move. If she stopped, she feared she might never start again. In the kitchen, cupboards hung open like gaping mouths. A single tin cup had rolled beneath the table and come to rest against the wall. She bent to retrieve it, brushing dirt from its surface with the edge of her sleeve. The gesture felt strangely intimate, as if she were touching something he had touched that very morning. 2,000 miles. She tried to picture the journey in reverse. The train whistle, the changing landscapes, the letters exchanged in careful ink. Every mile had been built on trust, on belief. Now she stood with nothing but a pocket watch and a photograph. She stepped back, outside onto the porch. The land stretched wide and indifferent before her, the prairie rolling toward the horizon without sympathy. The sheriff approached slowly, hat in hand. "You got folks back east?" he asked again, more gently this time. She shook her head. "My parents are gone. My aunt sold her house last spring. I used what remained of my dowry for the journey." He frowned. "You could stay in town a spell." "Boarding house. For how long?" she asked quietly. He had no answer. Her gaze drifted to the barn. One hinge hung broken, the door barely clinging to its frame. Beyond it lay open land, fertile despite its harshness. Daniel had chosen this place for a reason. He had seen something worth building, and they had tried to erase it. "What happens to the ranch?" she asked. Sheriff Cole shifted. "Without a claim filed or next of kin to contest it, land like this tends to change hands." Something in her chest tightened. Not with grief this time, but with resolve. "I am his intended wife," she said slowly. "We signed papers before I left. The marriage was to be performed here. That ain't quite the same as legal." "I have his letters," she interrupted, lifting her chin. "I have proof of agreement. If there must be a filing, then I will file it." The wind tugged at her hat, but she did not reach to steady it. The sheriff studied her for a long moment. He had likely expected tears, perhaps hysteria. A fragile bride collapsing under Western hardship. Instead, he saw something else forming. "This land was meant to be my home," she continued, her voice steadier now. "If I leave, then he truly disappears. Everything he built, gone." The sheriff exhaled slowly. "It won't be easy. You'd be alone out here." She looked back at the house. Broken windows, splintered doors, silence where laughter might have been. "I already am," she said softly. A long pause settled between them. Finally, Sheriff Cole nodded once. "I'll help you file the claim. And I'll ask around town about who might have done this." Clara stepped down from the porch, her boots pressing into the dry earth that would either bury her hopes, or anchor them. She had come west to become a wife. Instead, she would become something else entirely.